Great. I want to echo the sort of thank you to the organizers for organizing this workshop. I'm excited to be here, and appropriately, sort of a segue, my talk is about communicating and sensing across difference within community settings. So I'm going to introduce the project a little bit, and then sort of talk about a workshop that developed out of this project. So this is part of I'm currently an assistant professor at Coastal Carolina University, but this was part of my dissertation research, and this is in Ventura, California. So this is the Ventura River. It's a changing landscape, and it is an area, it's in between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara on the coast, and there was a large push within the city and some local community organizations to build a river parkway for both environmental restoration and tourism, recreation opportunities along the river. And so I was there just as this project was getting underway, and it's a great project, but the issue is that in sort of restoring the river and trying to reconnect people from the city to this river, that there are people who are living and have been living in this river bottom. So there have been encampments of homeless people or people without homes in the river bottom, established at least since World War II. They're well documented. So in some cases there were multiple generations of people living in the river. And so in order, right, in our sort of, ideas of restoring the nature in the river, right, and creating a safe place where the community will go into the river, involves removing homeless encampments. And so this is a photograph from my research. This is part of the river bottom. There's a plant, characterized as an invasive plant called a rindo that was also being removed at the same time. And people built camps within the rindo. So this is a photograph of one of the camps. This is someone from the local land conservancy who is there to actually notify the person in the camp that it's now considered private property, even though it's state park property, and that they're going to be clearing the park. They're going to be restoring this area, and so anything that wasn't removed within the next 2 days was going to be thrown out. And so I got there just as this started happening, so right in this transition. And so my project is a year-long ethnographic project. I was there for 12 months. And I worked with people in the river bottom. I also worked with environmental groups. I worked with social service agencies that were trying to house the homeless. I worked with people in the city hall and the city council, the city planning department, members of the public, and tried to, so really thinking about the way that we often sort of collapse the community into one sort of unitary entity, but really getting at these complexities and even power issues and dynamics within what we consider the community. So I partnered with over 10 different organizations and lots of people that were not in a community organization. And over that time, so the ethnographic part of the project, what that ended up doing is actually building relationships of trust at these various conflicting positions. And in those positions, my main goal was to understand their perspective, their experiences doing this work. And so in doing that, I told them all, like, my job, you should feel like I understand you and that I understand how you see your position. I may, on top of that, have an interpretation or an analysis that you don't agree with, right? But that comes from a place of understanding you. And so that actually ended up building these relationships where people were telling me things that they didn't share with each other. And part of the complicated aspect of that, I got to understand some of the people removing camps, right, are being dehumanized through this process as well. There are students, biology with biology degrees, wildlife conservation degrees, right, that are actually removing homeless camps as part of their job. And this is something that a larger change within this kind of work. I had a geography student at Ohio Wesleyan University who is working in a city park, who is working with homeless communities in the park, right? And so this is something that's a broader shift within the field, and something to think about what that means, and not something that we really talk about on in what we're preparing students for. So I started thinking about how people were sharing, people removing camps were talking about somatic health effects, ulcers, anger issues, bringing that anger home, and one person talked about taking it out on his wife when he got home. Psychosocial effects, increased substance abuse among environmental workers, right, who are doing this work. So I started thinking about how I was doing this. My PhD program was a community research and action PhD program at Vanderbilt. So I started thinking about how we often kind of use that, like Freudian's, like the concept of a deficit model when we talk about community work, right? Like we're gonna get this information, like the problem is one of a lack of information, right? So we're gonna take the marginalized or oppressed group, we're gonna get information, right? Whether it's through a map or through narratives, right? And communicate that to those in power in a way. And so I started thinking about these complexities and how we can actually address some of the issues on why people who are removing camps can't hear those narratives, right? So I designed a workshop that was a cultural intervention. So instead of I brought people from these different groups together who trust me, and to frame it as a community art project that we were doing together, so something creative. And so there were 2 exercises. One is the overlooked object exercise. So this is based on performative ethnography. So everyone had to choose an object that was overlooked or unappreciated and write a narrative from the perspective of that object. And then I also took close-up photographs of everyone's eyes. Both is something that represents our humanness and our difference, right? Within the same sort of aspect. And I had no idea what would happen. But we had these narratives, which I can't quite have the time to go through. But what actually happened is people spoke through their position. It created a safer space because you're speaking through an object and not through yourself, right? And so this is one of the river bottom residents. He says, I wonder how you feel, and for once I'm gonna tell you how it really is. You keep me home most of the time with no one, and I think, what the hell? When you finally come home, wow, I jump for joy. I shower you with kisses, love you no matter what. Know when you are sad or hurt. Golly Pete, show me the same. Turn that damn TV off, give me some of that love back a little longer. I am your dog and I have a right to be here. So we went through and everyone wrote their narrative and shared it from an ER nurse in the county hospital, right, who was a dustpan, that's what she chose. The protection coordinator for the Land Conservancy, who chose the tree marked by graffiti, right? I could get that. We can talk about that a little bit later. And what happened is, through sharing these narratives, people could also hear them, right? And it turned into a broader facilitated discussion that turned into the Land Conservancy started saying, okay, could we restore the river in a different way? Like, could we keep camps there, but do the restoration in a way that involved people who are living there, that wasn't about just throwing their things away? So it started shifting these imaginaries and these local agendas on what restoration means, what a restored river looks like, and the process that they can go through it. So I think part of these experimentations and methods, right, are important to think about how we can interpolate this difference. And for me, being someone that was from a far off university, ended up helping because people would sort of talk with me and I wasn't like their employer or someone that was quite tied. So it helped me kind of circulate among these different groups. So that's one aspect. And then I am now located in Horry County, South Carolina, on the coast. I moved there in August. We had a big hurricane and flood in September. And so I'm now there just starting some community organizing work around flooding and flood issues through the Coastal Conservancy there. And so I'm interested in networking both on what I talked about and any kind of networking and organizing techniques that you have around flooding and coastal development. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Beautiful.